Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 7th of August of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Sumy area, and before we start, I believe you've mentioned that we've chosen a very interesting title for the video, the thumbnail for the video. For this video we call the thumbnail Schrödinger's Kursk. What does it mean? The thing is that according to the updates that we received during the 7th of August, there are at least two or maybe more realities that currently we are living in. According to, for example, Russian sources, more precisely according to the Gerasimov, the head of Russian army, according to the person who is currently in charge of the special military operation from the Russian side, the operation in Kursk region will be completed within the defeat of the armed forces of Ukraine and reaching the state border, Gerasimov said at the meeting with Putin. Later, he added that the advance of the Ukraine armed forces deep into Russian territory has been stopped. Chief of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces Gerasimov. The Ukraine armed forces lost already 54 armored vehicles, including 7 tanks. So this is the reality that the officials of Russia are living in. But when talking about unofficial resources, when talking about the sources on the ground, when talking about different mappers, when talking about different military experts, we can see completely different situation. We can use the same words that was stated by Gerasimov, but to change Russia into Ukraine, and we will be completely correct, because the situation in Kursk area is completely critical. We're not saying that Gerasimov is wrong. We're not saying that the situation that have been described by different bloggers, military experts is correct. Currently, nobody knows for sure what exactly is happening here. The only thing we have is a number of geolocations, number of posts, number of reliable or unreliable posts, and so on. So let's discuss today everything we have, and let's every single one of us make his own decision who to believe or not, and to understand what exactly is happening here. And before we start, we are starting with the post of the Russian military expert Rybar. He stated the situation on the ground that took place on the ground, let's say in the morning at the beginning of the 7th of August, and let's discuss what he was talking about. First of all, the pro-Russian source reported that as a result of offensive operation, the Ukrainians managed to establish complete control over several villages. For example, the Ukrainians captured the village of Abukhovka. Also, the Ukrainians captured the village of Nikolaeva Daryana. Also, according to information we have from the same source, the Ukrainians captured Daryana and the Ukrainians captured Nizhny Klin. Furthermore, that was the first, let's say, cities, villages that were captured. Later, the Ukrainians managed to improve their positions further and to establish complete control over Pokrovsky, Tostoluk, and Lyubimovka. Obviously, this is significant progress to the armed forces of Ukraine. Later, we got updates that the Ukrainians captured Sverdlikova and Lebedeva. So the Ukrainians were moving also in direction of Suja, more precisely in the north, in direction of Suja, in direction of the village by the name of Kasacha Lochnya. Now let's move further. According to Rybar, the Ukrainians also managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Nova Ivanovka. This is it. Of course, as for these geolocations, as for this number of villages, we still haven't received even a single geolocation that can confirm, let's say, control over half of these villages that were described, but we have some geolocations that certainly confirms additional Ukrainian progress. Let's discuss this in details. If you remember, yesterday we were talking about this small intersection of the road and the tree line, bloody intersection for the Ukrainians, because the Ukrainians managed to reach this line yesterday by the evening of the 7th of August, and they managed to enter the territory. There is a very powerful and rich network of the fortifications that was built by the Russians. The Ukrainians captured this territory, they abandoned their armored vehicles, and the Russians attacked this territory immediately. And as a result of attack, some sources are saying that the Russians were attacking this territory with Iskanders missiles. Other sources are saying that was Tornado S. Anyway, as a result of a strike, the Ukrainians lost everything. everything there. We are talking about armored vehicles, of course. We are talking about ammo depots that were created there, but of course not about infantry, most likely. As a result of this attack, the Ukrainian infantry, the Ukrainian soldiers managed to survive, at least most of them, because as you can see once again from this angle of view, there is a very powerful and rich network of the fortifications that was built by the Russians during the previous months, and of course there are lots of places where the Ukrainian soldiers can hide. Obviously, so this is the situation. Later we got the video and some raw calculations, and according to sources, according to people who are making all these geolocations and calculations, as a result of this attack, the Ukrainians lost up to 10 vehicles. So the question is, can we judge whether the Ukrainians managed to capture this territory, to dig in deeper, and to establish 100% control over this territory? So this is a very simple question, and we need to answer is whether we can trust this or not. And if you ask my opinion, I'm telling you, yes, the Ukrainians managed to reach this line. The Ukrainians managed to dig in deeper. Furthermore, the Ukrainians managed to bring engineering equipment. For example, in this video, we can see the Ukrainian engineer machine and the Ukrainians who were walking, let's say, along this street, like along this line, as if they were walking along the street somewhere in New York, and they were very relaxed, and they were trying to evacuate armored vehicles, strikers most likely that were damaged or destroyed as a result of Russian Tornado S or Iskander strike. Once again, the main important words in this sentence: engineering equipment were redeployed by the Ukrainians according to, let's say, this video to the line of combat contact. Obviously, based on this video, we can make a conclusion that Ukrainians feel themselves pretty safe in this area, and that the line of combat contact and the front line is much far from this point. So yes, the Ukrainians managed to reach this line and to dig in deeper. Most likely the Ukrainians managed to move even further. During the previous night, the Russian sources published lots of videos of how they were bombing and attacking the Ukrainians during the previous night, using significant number of weapons, artillery forces, aviation, and so on. And for example, in this video we can see how the Russians were bombing the Ukrainian forces in the stronghold that we've been discussing right now, that's along the intersection of the road and the tree line. So we can recognize this, let's say, stronghold by its shape. But this is not the most important part of the video. A few seconds later in the same video we can see another explosion. In this video, in this episode, the Russians are saying they managed to attack and to destroy the Ukrainian convoy. And when talking about this part of the video, I would like to point your attention to this small forest. So this is small forest, and this is very important because based on this forest it become possible to discover and to recognize the place. And if we return back on map, we're gonna find this forest in this point. This is the forest, and that means that this video confirms that most likely the Ukrainians managed to reach the village of Alexandria and Leonidova and to capture them. So of course we will adjust the map, and it's time to start adding yellow color because the Ukrainians did capture significant territories, and the most important, the Ukrainians are moving further. Now let's talk about additional reports from the same area. For example, in this video we can see a Russian civilian who was trying to move on the road in direction of Suja, but he reached the, let's say, the checkpoint in the area of Zelený Shlях, and he if you have access to the map, you will be able to turn on the sound and you will hear what he was talking, but he was talking in Russian. And what was he saying? He said that oh my god, there are rifles on the ground, there are bodies of dead soldiers. And then after these words he turned his car back and started moving back in direction of the, let's say, city, maybe Karenova, or maybe in direction of Viktorovka, because he turned here and started moving in this direction. So this video confirms that some Ukrainian soldiers managed to reach this area, and as a result of short battle with the Russian checkpoint, most likely the Russians suffered losses and were forced to fall back. So we don't know for sure, of course, but maybe this is exactly what happened. Furthermore, right before we start making the video, we got probably one of the worst update for the Russians ever. It's like worst nightmare for the Russians. And according to information we have, the Ukrainian armed forces entered Karenova and Suja, two border district centers of Kursk region. So according to some very reliable Russian resource, the Ukrainians, the first reconnaissance sabotage groups, entered the village of Karenova, and the distance between this Karenova and the edge Russian positions, or not the edge Russian positions, but the contested area, possible Ukrainian edge positions, is around 15 kilometers. Telling the truth, the tactics and the situation that we are facing right now is completely similar to the situation that we used to see during Kharkiv counteroffensive of 2022. When the Ukrainians using very mobile vehicles were moving just forward, they were moving, while the main Ukrainian army was moving behind them. Now we see the same story. The edge Ukrainian forces are moving ahead, they're moving as far as possible, trying to capture as much as possible, trying to make a mess between the Russian defense orders, and while the Russians are trying to understand what is happening, the main Ukrainian forces are moving behind. Now let's talk about additional updates, and as you can see, one of the Ukrainian group is moving to Sverdlikova and to Kazachya Lokhna. So this is very important city, this village city, this is the outskirts or suburbs of Suja, and according to information we have, this territory is still under Russian control, but obviously the Ukrainians are trying to get there, because if the Ukrainians are able to take under control this small village, then the Ukrainians will be able to establish complete fire control over the road that goes to Suja itself. And if the Ukrainians are able to do this, the Russians will start suffering significant problems with logistics. On the other hand, today, right before also we start making the video, the Russian sources start publishing the videos of very big convoys of Russian vehicles and trucks, tanks and everything they have that were heading to Kursk direction. But one important thing, once again, these videos with significant number of reinforcements completely reminds me the situation that took place in Kursk as well. When the Russian defense collapsed completely, and when the Russians were withdrawing their positions from Kharkiv, when the Ukrainians seems to be unstoppable, the Russians also start publishing videos with the convoys, with vehicles and so on, but most of them were archived, and we can't tell for sure whether this video is real, new, or maybe this is also something archived from the period of 2022. Anyway, for now, the Kazachya Lokhna still under Russian control, so let's not change anything. Also, we have very interesting and probably interesting case that took place in the same Suja direction. In this video, we can see, let's say, the first case during the special military operation, how the Ukrainian FPV drone operator managed to hunt, to get and to destroy Russian helicopter as a result of FPV drone strike. At least the author of this video stated that he managed to do this, or the driver or the operator of drone managed to destroy. And we have, of course, some photo of ruined helicopter somewhere on the ground. We can't tell for sure whether it's correct, real or not information, but who knows what is happening right now in Kursk direction. Who is telling the truth? What is the state of Schrödinger's Kursk? Nobody knows, as I understand. Now let's move to Suja and let's discuss this area in details. Once again, according to the military expert Ribur, the Ukrainians continue concentration their forces exactly in Yunakivka. Wave by wave, 1,000 after another 1,000 is coming to this area, and after that the Ukrainians are sending them to the line of combat contact. And but according to information we have, the Ukrainians haven't managed to let's say get additional results or some progress between Yunakivka itself and Suja, but some sources are saying that Ukrainians managed to enter the village, and that this part of Goncharovka is already under complete Ukrainian control, but we still haven't received any mappers update or any geolocations that can confirm this. But this, for example, piece of news was also confirmed by Russian military expert Ribur. What else we have from this direction? We have significant number of prisoners of war that were captured by the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are saying that the total number of prisoners of war is around 42 soldiers, and they're not like they're conscripts. They're the soldiers that were recently mobilized during the regular Russian mobilization process, not like during the contract signing or something like this. And this is obviously a scandal that can lead to significant consequences consequences to the military authorities. Furthermore, there was a report from Aleshina. The Ukrainians are saying that they managed to block Aleshina and that there was a Russian squad inside of this area, and that the Russians didn't surrender, and the Russians were fighting completely encircled by the Ukrainians from every direction. For now, we don't know for sure whether the Ukrainians managed to bypass this area or not, but we know for sure that the Russians in this area decided not to fall back, and they were fighting with the Ukrainians. And maybe this is the reason why the Ukrainians haven't managed to enter Suja so fast. Basically, they were blocked by the Russians inside of the city. Furthermore, during the day, we start receiving, or the Ukrainians start publishing, the videos of the beginning of the operation. In this video, we can see the Ukrainian tanks that were moving to the border with Russia. And as you can see in this video, a significant number of tanks, and they have their own tactical sign. This is triangle with 2 points in the base, in the bottom. And we can see engineering equipment, we can see tanks itself, armored vehicles, personnel carriers. So the Ukrainians were pretty prepared, and they are prepared, and they're continuing offensive. Of course, we understand that the Ukrainians went all in. It's all in, obviously. The question is whether this all in can give the Ukrainians benefits, results, and so on. Because today we got a report from the United States of America that they will ask, United States of America, the official Washington, will ask Ukraine to provide details. The US intends to request clarification from Kyiv regarding the events in the Kursk region, the White House said. What is the problem? The problem is that according to the permissions and according to authorization that Ukrainians received during the previous phase of the special military operation, they were just authorized to use Western weapon in the vicinity of Kharkiv and Belgorod, exactly in the vicinity of the area where the Russians are conducting their own offensive operation. But as I understand, and according to information from the open source, the Ukrainians weren't authorized to use Western weapon in this part of Russia, and this can lead to very big significant problems for Ukrainians and for the United States of America, because Russia from this perspective can also begin authorization of, let's say, some forces, some proxies in the Middle East to use Russian weapon against the United States of America and its allies. So this is the situation in Suja. But a few more things. Of course, we are trying to ask, everybody currently is trying to understand and trying to ask where exactly the Russians are moving. What is their main target? Not the Russians, but the Ukrainians, sorry. And today, a lot of military experts report that most likely the Ukrainians are heading towards the Kursk nuclear power plant. But telling the truth, the distance is too big. I don't understand how exactly the Ukrainians can bypass these territories. This is possible just in case if there are no Russians in this area at all, and we have just militia with the forks and so on, the only. But if the Russians have some garrison in this direction, I don't think it's highly unlikely the Ukrainians are able to get the nuclear power plant. But if we return back to military experts that we received during the day, for example, Ribor also stated that currently the Ukrainians are trying or concentrating their forces inside of the village by the name of Glukhov. So there is a very big concentration of Ukrainian forces. The number and the level of the concentration is the same as we can see right now in front of Suja. So we have two concentration areas, one Yunakivka and the second Glukhov. The only difference is that Ukrainians began movements in Yunakivka towards Suja and towards at least Korineva. But as for Glukhov, we still haven't received anything. But during the night, as we discussed a few minutes ago, the Russians were bombing the concentration of forces of armored forces of Ukraine along the entire line of combat contact and the border. And there was one interesting video that was published in the vicinity of Tetkina. In this video, we can see, according to the author of this video was geolocated, how the Russians were bombing the concentration of Ukrainian forces with solar tower systems, with the FAPs and so on. There were more videos, but we still haven't managed to geolocate them. So this video confirms that there is another concentration of forces of Ukrainians in the vicinity of the village Varashba. So now, according to these 3 points, we can find the point where all these points are have some intersection. And as I understand, according to information, just according to simple logic and simple analysis, we can make a conclusion that most likely in the very near future, the Ukrainians will start offensive from Glukhov towards Rilsk. The Ukrainians will begin offensive Vorozhba, Tyotkina, also towards Rylsk. And we can see right now the movements of the Ukrainians already on the halfway to the same village from Suja, because once again, according to different military experts, the Ukrainians have already entered Koreniova. So maybe this is the Ukrainian target. They try to cut this Kursk arc, this small, let's say, call it like salient or something like a pocket. They will try to cut this. It's going to be not very easy. It's not very far from the line of combat contact, and of course it's closer, a bit closer to the Kursk nuclear power plant, that Ukrainians will be able to begin bombing and attacking with just regular artillery, forcing the Russians to stop, to slow down, and to force them to begin peace negotiations, of course in Ukrainian favor, or at least on the terms of Ukraine. Of course, it's not going to happen. Putin will never forgive this situation, of course, first of all to his generals who allowed this situation to happen, and then to Ukraine and Ukrainian officers and Ukrainian army. We can stop talking about any peace process in this year. Nothing like this is going to happen. As I understand, the 2025 will be another wave of war in the Ukraine. Now let's move further. As for other directions, we have additional updates from Kharkiv. For example, today the Russian reconnaissance drone published the video of the building that was attacked yesterday by Iskander. We can see the evacuation process. We can see the militants that were trying to evacuate wounded from above the ruins, from below the ruins, and this video confirms that most likely something very important was destroyed by the Russians as a result of Iskander strike. As for the situation on the ground in Volchansk, nothing happened, and as I understand, the Russians have sent reinforcements and reserves from this area towards Kursk, because this is the nearest position, and this can lead to activization or intensifying of actions from the Ukrainian side. They can begin offensive in this area now anytime, because lots of reserves exactly from this direction first were sent to Sumy, trying to stabilize the situation. And let's wait what is going to be here, because the situation is completely unpredictable. In this video, we can see the city of Tikha that was bombed by the Russians once again. As for additional updates, the most important information from, let's say, the old front lines is coming from New York agglomeration, from Novgorodska. The Russians managed to establish complete control over the western part of the city. The Russians raised the Russian flag, and now we understand more or less what exactly the Russians are planning to do during the next few days. They will try to create a cauldron, and most likely the cauldron will be created by the Russians. So summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that the next step of armed forces of Russian Federation is to reach Krivoy Tarets river. So this is the river. I'm not sure that, of course, the Russians are able to cross the river. It's not a big problem for them, but during the next phase of New York cauldron operation, they need to get the river and to establish the line of combat contact exactly along this small water barrier. So this is going to be the next Russian goal. And from the other side, from the let's say northeast side, the Russians will try to establish complete control over this small energy facility, over this energy facility construction. And if the Russians are able to do this, then this is going to be obviously a cauldron. Of course, for now, nobody cares about this cauldron, because the situation in Sumy is the main topic, is the mainstream everywhere. And regarding the Russian progress and whether the Russians are able to even capture, I don't know, Pokrovsk within the next few days, nobody cares. As I understand, everybody is following just for Sumy, because the situation there is very interesting. But anyway, if we return back to Novgorodsk, New York, the distance in this case from the edge Russian positions is be less than 2 kilometers, and this is going to be complete cauldron for armored forces of Ukraine. For now, we don't know for sure the exact number of soldiers inside of this area, but obviously this might be also some media picture for the Russians. I'll remind you that there is an industrial zone, the heart of New York. This is the main base of Ukrainians that can keep significant number of forces inside of this area. This is exactly the area where we can find the most of Ukrainian army that are trying to hide under Russian artillery and bombardments. As for Pivnichne, As you can see, today we got another video. In this video we can see how the Ukrainians were counterattacking the Russians, and according to this video the Ukrainians managed to get deep inside of Russian defense in Pivnichne. According to different mappers, also according to pro-Ukrainian and neutral mappers, these territories, this street was captured by the Russians a long time ago, and we have colored this area as a contested area, but now we see that most likely they were wrong. Either the Ukrainians managed to counterattack or something else. Anyway, the Ukrainians reached this line, and then the Ukrainians were ambushed and were attacked by the Russian FPV drones. So as I understand, we need to adjust the map, and most likely we're going to do this if we receive additional video that can confirm this, because on the other hand, this video might be archived, let's say from the beginning of July or something like this. Anyway, as for this direction, there were no progress during the day. The Russians continue their offensive operation in Constantinofka. During the previous 24 hours, we got significant number of geolocations that were published by the Ukrainians, and most of them were related to the Ukrainian attempts to repel Russian attacks. Lots of waves, lots of FPV drone strikes, lots of armored vehicles were destroyed by the Ukrainians, and a lot of geolocations. Two of the geolocations were discovered in the eastern part of Constantinovka, and today, for the first time, probably since the beginning of the battle for the village, the Ukrainians of 79th Brigade stated that that's it. This is the end. This is the end. There is no way to how to save control over this city or the ruins that left from the city. We have adjusted the map, as you can see, and now the Ukrainians began talking that they don't need Constantinovka. Constantinovka is nothing. We have very good and reliable positions. I'm talking about Ukrainians in Katerinovka and Antonovka, and it's time to start thinking how to redeploy forces from Constantinovka to this village, and how to try to stop the Russians exactly in this area. So telling the truth, I had a feeling when I was reading the post that the days, not even weeks, of Constantinovka are numbered, and soon the Russians will begin to move even further. As for other directions, we haven't received lots of interesting updates, just regular military activity. The Russians were bombing and attacking, and the thing is that currently everybody in Ukraine Russian army is pointing his attention to Sumy. Everybody from Ukrainian side, from the Russian side, and of course, while everybody is watching at one point, it's the best time to do something in completely different direction. So most likely within the next few days, so the days to the next event obviously are numbered, something big is going to happen. And of course, there are a lot of military experts who have already advised the Russian military authorities to improve their defense of Crimean Bridge or of nuclear power plants all over the entire Russia, because something big may happen. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.